Okay, so this starts with Amanda walking into a meeting and saying something like, compliance isn't culture, it's just fear in a blazer. And honestly, the room kind of laughs, but something about it just feels off. Like, really off. I remember sitting there thinking, wait, this company is about to change in a way nobody's ready for. And I don't mean slowly. I mean something big is already shifting under the surface, even if nobody wants to say it out loud yet. So Amanda walks in like she owns the air in the room. No hesitation, no checking the mood, nothing like that. Just straight in, flanked by two guys she casually calls change agents. One of them's already holding this massive cold brew, like it's part of his identity or something. And right away, you can feel it. The whole energy shifts. She doesn't sit down and ask what's going on. She just starts announcing things, like the company is already hers and everyone else is just catching up. And I remember sitting there, far end of the glass table, just watching this unfold. I had my binder in front of me, thick thing, 200 pages, full internal audit protocol. I'd built that over 6 years, 6 years of mergers, policy rewrites, compliance overhauls, NDAs stacked on NDAs. It wasn't just paperwork. It was the skeleton of how everything actually worked. And honestly, the room still smelled like dry erase markers and those cheap boxed cookies legal always brought to quarterly check-ins, that weird mix of effort and exhaustion. Amanda, though, she didn't care about any of that. She looks around and just reframes everything in one breath. All data governance teams are now being consolidated under a single vertical. My team, client systems and integrity, apparently doesn't exist the way it used to. She's talking like silos are the enemy, like structure itself is some outdated idea. And you can see people nodding, not because they agree exactly, but because she's speaking with that kind of confidence that makes disagreement feel risky. And I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, this is not a normal restructuring talk. This is something else, because she's not merging things. She's cutting them apart and repackaging them into something she can control more easily. And she's doing it like it's obvious, like anyone who questions it just doesn't get it. Then she finally pauses, just for a second, and I take it. I ask, pretty calmly, have you reviewed our federal retention obligations for audit trails under the new acquisition? And the way she reacts, it's like she's barely even hearing me. She smirks. Not even annoyed, just amused. Like I said something cute but irrelevant. And she goes, we're not here to play scared, darling. Bureaucracy is a form of self-harm. And the room, it laughs. Not everyone, but enough. The intern definitely laughs. Even the CTO, Michael, does this awkward half laugh, like his spine forgot what it's supposed to do for a second. It's not real humor. It's survival laughter. The kind you do when you're not sure where the line is anymore. I don't laugh. I just open the binder a little, because inside it isn't just policy. It's the chain of custody protocols. Every log, every deletion rule, every backup authorization, time-stamped and countersigned, everything that keeps the system legally and structurally intact. And I realize she's not even looking at that layer of the company. She's just looking at it like it's friction. Amanda keeps going. She says things like consolidation, efficiency, alignment, big, clean words that sound good if you don't know what they cost. And with every sentence, you can feel the structure of the company getting redefined without anyone actually agreeing to it. Then I stand up, not dramatically, just enough. And I say, if we're scrapping protocol, someone needs to tell legal, or better yet, tell the buyer. That lands differently. You can feel it in the room. Not chaos, not yet, but a shift, like a temperature drop that nobody acknowledges out loud. Amanda finally looks at me more directly, and for a split second, there's something behind her expression. Not fear, more like curiosity mixed with irritation, like she didn't expect resistance to be organized. Then she smiles, not warm, not really even human, just controlled. And she says, let's circle back on tone, shall we? We don't just control references, we own your reputation. And that's the moment it really settles in, not just what she's doing, but how she sees everything. Structure, policy, even people, all of it is just narrative to her, something you can rewrite if you're confident enough. I sit back down slowly, not because I agree, because I'm watching now, because I want to see how far this actually goes. And the room, it's quieter now, but not peaceful. It's that kind of quiet where everyone is suddenly calculating what they're allowed to think. Nobody wants to be the next person who asks the wrong question. Amanda keeps talking like nothing changed, like she didn't just redraw the internal map of the company in real time. But I can feel it. Something already shifted. Not officially, not on paper yet, but in people, in behavior, in how fast everyone is willing to adapt to her version of reality. And I'm still holding that binder, closed now, just resting on the table. Because at that point, it's not about what I know anymore. It's about what the system remembers when people start pretending it doesn't exist. So after that meeting, things don't explode right away. That's the weird part. It's not dramatic at first. It's quiet, almost polite. Amanda doesn't even need to announce anything official. She just exists differently in the building after that day. Like the meeting gave her permission she didn't technically ask for, but everyone decides to grant anyway. The first thing I notice is people start referring to her differently. Not in meetings, not directly, but in passing. Amanda said this, or we should align with Amanda's direction. Like her name becomes shorthand for authority. And slowly, without anyone really agreeing to it, she becomes the reference point for decisions that used to go through proper channels. And me, I start noticing I'm not in those conversations anymore. At first it's subtle. A calendar invite I expected just doesn't show up. I refresh it a couple times, thinking it's a sync delay or something normal, but it's not. It's just gone. No cancellation, no note, nothing, just empty space where a meeting used to be. Then it happens again and again within a couple days. My calendar looks strange. Not full, not busy, just hollow. Like someone carefully removed everything that used to connect me to the system, but left the shell intact so it doesn't look dramatic. And Slack gets quieter in a way that's hard to explain. Not no messages, just no messages to me. Channels I built, threads I used to drive, discussions I used to be tagged in, they keep going, just without me. Like I'm still technically there, but not relevant enough to include. I remember sitting there one afternoon just staring at it, watching notifications pop up that clearly used to be mine. Someone else is now being tagged where I would have been. Someone else responding to questions I used to answer automatically. And I don't even feel angry at first. It's more like disorientation, like walking into a room you swear you designed and realizing the furniture has been moved just enough that it doesn't feel like yours anymore. Then the reassignments start. Not announced, never announced, just quietly happening in the background. People I trained start disappearing from my day-to-day. Chloe, one of the junior analysts, stops messaging me. I hear later she's been moved under Amanda's workflow optimization team, whatever that means. Carlos, my right hand for years, gets reassigned too. No explanation, just a shift in priorities. I see him once in the hallway. He barely looks at me, not out of disrespect, more like confusion. Like he's trying to figure out what version of reality we're both supposed to be in now. And Amanda, she starts sending these emails. They have titles like culture notes. At first, I think it's just corporate noise, but then I open one, and it's structured differently. Not policy, not updates. More like messaging. Carefully phrased ideas about risk, about agility, about embracing uncertainty as growth. Every email ends with some line about courage or transformation. Like she's trying to rewrite how people emotionally relate to the company itself. And slowly, those emails start shaping behavior. People begin quoting them in conversations, not even ironically. I remember walking past a group near the kitchen and hearing someone say, well, Amanda did say risk is just misunderstood opportunity, and nobody laughs after. It just sits there. That's when I realized she's not just changing structure, she's changing language. And when language changes, everything else follows. Even the physical space feels different. Lights above my desk flicker more often. Small maintenance things that used to get fixed quickly don't anymore. It's not sabotage, it's neglect. And somehow that feels worse. People stop stopping by my desk, not because they're told to, because they don't need to anymore. And I start noticing this gap forming between me and everyone else. Not a confrontation, just distance. Like I've been quietly moved to the edge of a conversation that is still happening without me. One afternoon, I open Slack and realize I'm not tagged in a single active thread anymore. Not one. Channels I helped create are running full conversations, and I'm just not there. No one says anything to me directly about it. That's the strangest part. There's no moment of exclusion, just gradual disappearance. Even Michael, the CTO, starts acting differently, not openly hostile, just careful. He avoids eye contact in hallways, shortens conversations, leaves space where there used to be none. And I understand it, in a way, not logically, but structurally. He's adapting. Everyone is adapting. Except it doesn't feel like adaptation, it feels like alignment under pressure. Amanda keeps moving through the office like she's part of a system upgrade no one fully understood, but everyone agreed to install anyway. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. People just respond to her presence like it carries instructions. And I'm still technically there, still listed, still on paper part of the system. But in practice, I'm floating. One day, I open my calendar and it's almost completely empty. Not just meetings removed, but invites I never declined are gone too, like someone cleaned the timeline itself. I sit there for a moment just staring at it, trying to decide if this is intentional or just the natural outcome of everything shifting at once. And I think about that meeting again, about how fast confidence can override structure when enough people decide it feels easier to follow than to question. Because that's what this is becoming, not a coup, not a collapse, just a quiet consensus forming around someone who speaks with certainty. And I'm still here, watching it happen in real time, trying to figure out when exactly I stopped being part of the conversation and started just observing it instead. But the strangest part is how normal it all looks from the inside. So it doesn't really happen all at once. That would almost be easier to understand. It's more like pieces of my job just quietly stop responding. One morning, I try to access a system I've used for years, and it just doesn't load. No error, no warning, just a blank response like I've been politely denied entry without anyone bothering to say it out loud. I refresh it, same thing. Then I get another system locked out, and another, still no message, no explanation. I remember sitting there thinking, okay, maybe this is a technical issue, maybe something's sinking, but deep down, I already know that's not it, because this doesn't feel like failure, it feels like removal. A few hours later, HR schedules a meeting with me. No context, just a calendar invite titled Role Alignment Discussion. That title alone already tells me everything and nothing at the same time. I join the call, and it's a woman named Denise. I've seen her before in passing, the kind of HR presence that always looks like she hasn't unclenched her jaw in years. She doesn't waste time. She says it's part of the flattening initiative. I ask what that actually means. She pauses like she's deciding how technical she's allowed to be with me. Then says something about reducing structural redundancy and increasing cross-functional fluidity, which is a very long way of saying, my role is being dissolved into something less visible. She keeps repeating that it's not personal, that line, specifically. It's not personal, but everything about it is personal, even if no one admits it. When I ask what my actual responsibilities are now, she says I'll be transitioning into special projects under strategic oversight. And I remember just sitting there thinking, special projects is not a job description, it's a limbo. After the call, I go back to my desk, or what used to be my desk, and it already feels different. Not physically, just socially. Like the space around me has been quietly marked as inactive. People walk past but don't stop anymore. No one really looks confused. That's the part that gets me. There's no shock, no questions. It's like everyone else already received the update, and I'm just catching up late. Then it gets worse. I'm mid-task one afternoon, still trying to understand what I'm supposed to be working on in this so-called special projects role, when my access drops again, this time more aggressively. I get kicked out of a live system while actively using it. Just disconnected. No warning, no grace period. I sit there staring at the screen, kind of frozen, like I'm waiting for it to correct itself, but it doesn't. A few minutes later, I get an email from Amanda. Not a direct message, not even addressed to me personally, just part of a broader thread about organizational clarity. She thanks everyone for embracing this new chapter, talks about empowering thought partnership and reducing executional noise. Then there's a line that lands differently. She says this new structure will allow me to focus on strategic partnership without the burden of operational execution. Strategic partnership. It sounds almost flattering if you don't think about it too hard, but I do. Because what it actually means is I'm no longer allowed to touch anything that functions. I sit back in my chair after reading it and just exhale slowly, not out of frustration exactly, more like recognition. This isn't confusion anymore, it's design. Later that day, I notice my Slack access is partially limited. I can still log in, but channels start disappearing from my view. Threads I used to be part of are now read only. Some I can't even open, and no one mentions it. That silence is the most noticeable thing. Even the office feels different around me now. Not louder or quieter, just redirected, like conversations are gently bending away from my desk without anyone physically turning their head. I try asking a colleague what's going on, and they hesitate before answering. Not because they don't know, but because they do. They just don't want to be the one to say it. Special projects, they repeat eventually, almost like it explains everything, but it doesn't. It just confirms I've been moved somewhere no one has to define. And the worst part is, I can feel myself adapting to it, sitting longer at my desk without being asked for anything, refreshing empty systems out of habit, watching my calendar shrink like it's being erased one block at a time. It's not dramatic, no confrontation, no final moment, just steady removal. And somewhere underneath all of it, I realize I'm not being replaced. I'm being made irrelevant on purpose. At some point, confusion just stops being useful. It doesn't disappear exactly, it just runs out of room. Because when you've been locked out of enough systems, removed from enough conversations, and quietly erased from enough workflows, you stop asking what's happening and start asking something else. Who did this and how? So I stopped reacting, and I started documenting, not in a dramatic way, no big declaration, just small, deliberate steps. I began pulling copies of everything I still had access to, old audit logs, archived workflows, internal policy drafts, even cached versions of documentation I had written years ago. Anything that showed how the system used to behave when it was still consistent with itself. Because that was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't just that things were changing, it was that they were changing in ways that didn't line up with their own rules. Deletion records that didn't match retention policies. Access changes happening without audit trails. Permissions shifting without corresponding approvals. Little fractures in the structure that only make sense if you assume someone is overriding the system quietly from inside. And the more I looked, the more it stopped feeling like chaos. It felt coordinated. Like someone wasn't breaking the system, they were steering it. I started building a private archive, air-gapped storage, encrypted backups. I didn't trust anything that lived only inside company infrastructure anymore. Not because I was paranoid, but because I could see the inconsistencies stacking up. One log would say a process was disabled on Tuesday. Another would show it running on Wednesday under a different identifier, same function, different name, no explanation in between. That's not malfunction, that's rewriting. And while all of that was happening, the silence around me kept growing. People still passed by my desk, but now they didn't even pretend to include me in anything. Conversations would stop mid-sentence when I walked into rooms. It wasn't hostility, it was avoidance, like I'd become a variable no one wanted to calculate anymore. Then Michael, the CTO, shows up. Not in a meeting, not officially, just standing in my doorway one afternoon like he's been rehearsing this moment and still doesn't like how it feels. He's holding a coffee he hasn't touched, and he looks tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. He says quietly, "I didn't have a choice." And I remember just looking at him for a second before answering, because that sentence is always more complicated than it sounds. "You always have a choice," I say. He shakes his head slightly, not disagreeing exactly, more like acknowledging the cost of admitting I'm right. "It's complicated," he says, "and I can see it, not fear of me. Fear of something larger. Fear of being noticed by whatever is currently deciding what stays and what gets quietly removed." I ask him directly, "If I say anything, what happens?" And there's a pause that tells me everything before he even speaks. "I'll be next," he says, and I just nod slowly, because that part at least is honest. But then something shifts in me, not emotionally, structurally, because I realize I've been assuming this is improvisation, people reacting, adjusting, improvising control, but it's not. It's bound by rules. Just not the ones they're talking about. That night, I go back through old documentation, deep archives, legal frameworks, system governance policies that most people never read past the executive summary, and that's when I find it. Buried in a compliance document from 3 years ago, written during a system redesign I actually led. Paragraph 42C, subnote 3. It's written in formal language, almost boring at first glance. The kind of clause people skim because it looks like standard legal filler, but it isn't. It states that in the event of a reorganization or reassignment of operational responsibility, the outgoing system custodian is required to execute a final encrypted transfer of all log archives to a designated custody node. Not optional, not advisory, required. And it gets more specific. The transfer must be registered with a notarized signature, time-bound, logged, verifiable. And then the part that makes everything click. It has a deadline. 5 business days from reclassification? I just sit there for a moment staring at it because I understand now what I've been watching unfold. This isn't just exclusion. It's not even restructuring. It's a trigger event, and they either don't know it or they're pretending not to. I start tracing the timeline backward. My access revocation date, the HR call, the flattening initiative message, Amanda's restructuring announcement, all of it lines up. Too clean, too precise, like a sequence that only looks accidental if you don't know the rule set underneath it. And I realize something else. I'm still the last recorded custodian under that clause, which means the system doesn't consider me removed. It considers me responsible. The next morning, I don't go into panic mode, I don't send emails, I don't confront anyone. I start building instead. I pull every remaining trace of access I still have, not to active systems, but to evidence layers, logs, backups, metadata histories, anything that can be independently verified outside the live environment. Because now it's not about proving I'm right. It's about preserving what the system itself already recorded. And then Michael comes back again. This time he doesn't stand in the doorway. He sits, which tells me this is worse for him than the last time. He says they think it's just cleanup, flattening, reorg. He laughs once, but there's no humor in it. I don't think they read the bottom half of the governance docs. I don't respond immediately, because I already know. Then he adds, quieter. Amanda thinks she owns the structure now. And I finally look at him. She doesn't, I say. And for the first time, he doesn't argue. Because now we both understand the same thing. She didn't replace the system. She just stepped inside it without reading the parts that decide what happens next. So I don't rush it. That's the first thing. Because this isn't the kind of moment where speed helps you. It's the kind where precision matters more than anything else. I bring in my own machine, not the company laptop. That one's already a liability at this point. Quietly monitored, partially restricted, probably logged in ways I don't even need to see anymore. This is my personal setup. Clean, controlled, air-gapped where it needs to be. I sit in a space that isn't really part of the office anymore. One of those unused corners near the service corridor, where the noise drops just enough that you can think clearly. No one comes here unless they have a reason to disappear for a few minutes, which is perfect. I power it on. And for a second, there's just that normal hum. No drama, no indication that anything important is about to happen. And I kind of like that, because big systems don't announce themselves. They just respond when they're supposed to. The first thing I check is the compliance bot. It's still there. Quiet, dormant, exactly how I left it. And that matters more than it should. Because most people assume once you're pushed out of a system, everything you built gets cleaned up or reassigned. But this one was never tied to user identity in the way people think. It wasn't personal software, it was infrastructure logic. A trigger-based watcher buried deep enough that nobody bothered to question it during the last round of optimization. I don't activate anything yet. I just verify. Because trust is not something you assume in environments like this. It's something you confirm step by step. Then I start the sequence. Not a dramatic sequence, not some cinematic moment, just a set of controlled inputs that only makes sense if you understand the structure underneath them. I initiate the archive request through the certified pathway, the same one defined in the compliance framework I helped design years ago when this system was still trying to be predictable. There's a pause, not a delay exactly, more like the system acknowledging the request, checking it against its own rules, trying to decide if it's valid, and then it accepts. That part always feels strange, even now, because nothing about this feels like hacking or forcing anything. It feels like asking a system to remember its own instructions. The compliance bot wakes up quietly in the background. No alerts, no noise, just a shift in status that I can see, but nobody else would notice. It starts compiling, not copying, not scraping, compiling, because it isn't pulling random fragments. It's reconstructing a structured archive based on custodial rules, logs, access trails, deletion histories, version changes, all of it stitched together in the exact order the governance model requires. And here's the part that always stands out to me. It doesn't ask for permission again. It already has it, because that permission was embedded in the system long before any of this happened. While it runs, I prepare the transfer environment. Isolated node, verified endpoint, encrypted channel with a protocol level that most people in the company never even read past the abstract. AES 256 layered encryption. But honestly, that's just the surface description. What matters more is the custody chain binding. Every piece of data gets tagged with its origin, its handler, and its transfer authority. Not just stored, but accounted for. This isn't about hiding anything. It's about proving it exists. I initiate the transfer, and for a moment, everything slows down. Not visually, not literally, just in perception. Because once the system begins moving data under custody rules, it stops being reactive and becomes procedural. It follows steps. It doesn't improvise. The archive starts flowing, line by line, record by record, not as files, but as verified structures. Each segment passing through validation checks that I recognize immediately because I wrote them. And I think that's the part that hits the most. This isn't new. This is just something I built coming back to me through the exact path I designed for situations like this. There's no resistance from the system, no corruption flags, no anomalies, because nothing about this is outside its expected behavior. That's what people miss. They think control is about stopping things, but real control is about defining what happens when things continue. The transfer completes in stages, each one logged, each one sealed, each one binding the next. And then comes the final step. Custody chain activation. The system pauses again, just long enough to verify the chain of authority. Not me as a person, but me as a role, as the last registered custodian under the governance clause. And when it confirms it, everything locks into place. No fanfare, no notification blast, just a quiet confirmation line on screen. Custody chain confirmed. Primary node integrity preserved. That's it. No celebration, no satisfaction spike, just completion. I sit back slightly and let it settle. Because the important part isn't that it worked. It's that it only worked because the system never stopped following its own rules. Even when everyone inside it started pretending those rules didn't matter anymore. And for the first time in a while, nothing feels unstable. Not because things are safe, but because they are finally fully aligned with what they were always supposed to be. So after that, everything starts to move faster, but in a weirdly controlled way. On the surface, it looks like progress, like the company is gearing up for something big. There's talk of acquisition, integration, scaling, all those polished words that sound exciting if you don't look too closely at what they actually require. But underneath it, you can feel it. Everyone is performing. Amanda especially. She's everywhere at once now, running walkthroughs, hosting alignment sessions, pushing these carefully staged narratives about how ready the system is. And the thing is, she's good at it. Or at least she looks good at it. That matters more in moments like this than people want to admit. Because most of what leadership sees isn't the system itself, it's what gets shown to them. And Amanda has figured that out. She starts building what I can only call versions of reality, clean dashboards, filtered metrics, summarized logs that look complete at first glance, but fall apart if you know where to dig. Everything is simplified just enough to be convincing. She calls it clarity, but it's really just control over visibility. I first notice it during one of the internal prep reviews. I'm watching from a distance now, not officially part of anything, but still close enough to see how things are being presented. On screen, everything looks stable. Clean system health indicators, green status across the board, retention compliance marked as validated, access integrity labeled as fully governed. It's almost beautiful in a way, if you don't know what's missing, and I do. Because none of it matches the raw logs anymore. Not perfectly, not even closely in some places. But Amanda doesn't seem worried. If anything, she's confident. She's learned how to present confidence as proof. Then the buyer starts asking questions. At first, they're polite, almost routine. Can we verify retention chains? Can we see original deletion logs? Who has custodial authority over historical archives? Normal questions for due diligence. The kind you expect in any serious acquisition process. But the room shifts slightly every time one comes up. Not visibly at first, more like tension tightening under the surface. Amanda answers quickly, too quickly sometimes. She talks about structured summaries, optimized visibility layers, governed access controls, words that sound technical enough to discourage follow-ups. And for a while, it works. But then the buyer doesn't stop. They start narrowing in. Not aggressively, just consistently. It starts with a simple request. Can we see raw retention logs? Amanda smiles and redirects. We can provide validated summaries instead. They're more digestible and already reconciled for review purposes. There's a pause on the call. Not long, but enough. And I can feel it even through a screen somewhere else in the building. That moment where a simple answer doesn't fully satisfy anymore. Then comes the next question. Who performed custodial verification on those summaries? Amanda hesitates for half a second too long, then says the system is automated. And that's the first real crack. Because automation is not a substitute for custody in environments like this. It's only a mechanism, and mechanisms still need authority behind them. The buyer notices. You can see it in the way they shift tone, slightly more formal now, less conversational. They start asking for audit-level depth instead of summaries, chain of custody proofs instead of dashboards, time-stamped logs instead of aggregated visuals. And suddenly, Amanda's world starts getting harder to maintain, because dashboards are easy to control. But raw logs don't cooperate, not unless they're actually intact. Meanwhile, inside the company, the performance continues. Leadership meetings are still upbeat, slides are still polished. There's this ongoing insistence that everything is on track, that integration is smooth, that risk is being actively managed. But I start noticing small things again. Slack channels where discussions about audit readiness suddenly go quiet after certain questions are raised. Internal documents being updated without visible revision history. References to legacy systems slowly disappearing from presentations. It's not loud. It's erasure by refinement. And Amanda is at the center of it. She's running point on most of the acquisition-facing material now. She hosts what she calls readiness syncs, where teams are walked through curated versions of system health. Everything is framed as progress, but there's a difference between progress and reconstruction, and the buyer is starting to notice that difference. One of the meetings gets tense in a way no one really acknowledges at first. A buyer representative, calm voice, no emotion, asks again for full custody chain verification. Amanda responds like she's been waiting for this question. She says they've implemented a layered abstraction model for governance visibility, which sounds impressive if you don't translate it. But the buyer does. And they ask again, more directly this time, for original logs, not summaries, not visualizations. Original records? There's a pause. Longer now. Amanda smiles, but it doesn't land the same way it used to. It feels rehearsed. She says they'll follow up offline, and I can see it then, even from where I am. That answer doesn't close the conversation anymore. It opens it. After that call, things inside the company start tightening. Not in a productive way, in a defensive one. Meetings become more controlled. Messaging becomes more cautious. People stop improvising answers and start reading from prepared narratives. And Amanda doubles down. She pushes more dashboards, more summaries, more curated data environments that look clean, but feel increasingly detached from anything verifiable. It's like watching someone try to hold water in their hands by convincing everyone the shape of their palms is the container. And it works until it doesn't, because the buyer isn't asking for stories anymore. They're asking for proof. And proof doesn't care how well something is presented. I'm not in those meetings directly, but I hear enough. Enough fragments, enough reactions, enough silence after certain questions land. And I start noticing something else too. The internal confidence that used to surround Amanda, it's thinning, not collapsing yet, but stretching. Like a structure underweight that hasn't decided where to break, but knows it eventually will. And the more the buyer presses, the more visible that strain becomes. Because every polished answer she gives creates another gap somewhere else. And gaps don't stay empty in systems like this. They expand. I don't say anything. Not yet. Because at this point, it's not about pushing. It's about watching what the system does when every layer of presentation starts getting compared against something it can't fully simulate. And slowly, very slowly, you can feel the shift. From confidence, to maintenance, to containment. And that's when you know the system isn't stable anymore. It's just still standing. The final board call starts like all the others, too calm. That's the strange part. Even when everything is about to fall apart, corporate meetings don't change their tone. Same scheduling, same clean interface, same carefully muted professionalism. But this time, everyone feels it. The buyer's team joins first. No small talk, no easing in, just presence, controlled, focused. Amanda's already there, camera on, posture perfect. In that way she always has when she knows she's being evaluated. She looks ready, or at least, she looks like someone trying to look ready. Michael is already in the call too. Quiet, unshaven, eyes tired in a way that suggests he hasn't been sleeping much at all. He's not speaking yet, just watching. And then the buyer opens No buildup, just a request. We need original retention logs, full chain, unmodified, not summaries, not exports, source level records. And there it is again, that word, original. Amanda responds immediately, too immediately. She talks about structured governance layers, about validated data pipelines, about controlled abstraction environments designed for audit efficiency. It sounds smooth, practiced, but the buyer doesn't move. They just repeat the request, same words, same tone. And something in the room changes. Not loudly, not dramatically, just pressure, like air being removed from a sealed space, one slow increment at a time. Amanda tries again, but now there's a slight edge to her voice. She talks about system optimization, about how raw logs can be misleading without contextualization. And that's when Michael finally speaks. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. We don't have them in the form they're asking for. Silence. Amanda turns slightly toward him. Not fast, not angry yet, just a controlled pivot. What do you mean we don't have them? And Michael hesitates. That hesitation matters more than anything else so far, because it's not confusion, it's acceptance. He exhales once, like he's been holding something in for a long time. They were never fully transferred after reclassification, he says. That phrase lands differently. Reclassification. Amanda's expression shifts, just slightly. Explain, she says. And now the room is fully still. Michael looks down for a second, then back up. Custody was never reassigned formally. The outgoing system custodian remained the only verified holder under clause 42C3. And for a moment, no one reacts, because it takes a second for that to register. Then it does. And everything changes. Amanda blinks once, slowly. That's not possible, she says. But Michael doesn't correct her, because he knows it is. The buyer leans forward slightly now, that small shift that signals full attention. Who is the registered custodian of record? And there's a pause. Not hesitation this time. Recognition. Because the answer is already in the system they're questioning. Michael looks toward the screen, then slightly off to the side, and he says it, quietly. Her. Amanda's face tightens. What do you mean, her? But no one answers immediately, because now the structure is exposed. Not broken, exposed. And that's worse. The buyer doesn't react emotionally, they just shift focus. We need confirmation of custodial chain integrity from the last verified operator. That phrase again, verified operator. And suddenly, everything that's been built around abstraction, summaries, dashboards, all of it starts collapsing under something very simple, proof. Amanda tries to recover. She starts talking again, faster now, about interim governance, about distributed oversight, about transitional access frameworks. But it's not landing anymore, because everyone in the room can feel it. The system she's describing isn't the system that actually exists. It's the system she needed to believe existed. Michael interrupts again, softer this time. We removed live archive access during restructuring, he says, but we never executed a formal custodial transfer. And that sentence is the fracture point, because now it's not interpretation, it's admission. The buyer goes quiet for a few seconds, not confused, not surprised, just confirming internally. Then they speak again. If custody was never transferred, then all downstream validation based on those records is non-compliant. No one answers that because there's nothing to answer. Amanda's control doesn't collapse loudly. It just stops working. Like a script that no longer matches the system it's running on. She tries one last time to steer the conversation back into structure, but now even her language feels disconnected from what's actually being discussed. The buyer isn't listening to narrative anymore. They're listening for continuity. And it isn't there. Then the legal representative from the buyer's side speaks. Calm, precise. We will require direct verification from the original custodian of record with full indemnity and authenticated chain validation. And that's when everything fully locks into place. Because now it's no longer about systems. It's about authority. Amanda opens her mouth, but nothing comes out for a second. For the first time, she doesn't have a structured response ready. Michael looks down, not out of guilt, out of recognition that the line has already been crossed. And somewhere outside that call, something else is happening quietly. Because systems like this don't wait for permission once the rule condition is met. They respond. The custodian clause activates. Not visibly, not theatrically, just structurally. Verification pathways open. Audit integrity checks align. And the system flags the last registered custodial authority as active. The buyer notices before Amanda does, because suddenly their dashboard changes state. Not dramatically, just correctly. And that correctness is what makes everything else untenable. A new line appears in the verification layer. Custodian of record active. Chain integrity confirmed. And for the first time in the entire process, there is no ambiguity in the system. Amanda realizes it a second later, You can see it in the way she stops speaking, not mid-sentence, just completely. Because now she understands she isn't being evaluated anymore. She is being bypassed. The buyer doesn't argue, doesn't escalate. They simply adjust. We will proceed with direct custodial engagement, they say. And the call continues without her holding the center of it anymore. It's not dramatic, it's administrative, which is somehow worse. Michael stays silent for the rest of it. Amanda sits still, not because she's composed, but because there's nothing left to adjust. And somewhere outside that frame, the system completes its verification cycle. Clean, finale, unquestionable. And for the first time in all of this, the record matches the truth again. And yeah, in the end, it wasn't really about power or titles. It was about what the system actually remembers when people start rewriting the story. Because systems don't forget. Not really. They just wait for the right moment to speak in their own language again. And when they do, everything lines up. Anyway, if you enjoyed this one, you know what to do, like, subscribe, all that. It really helps more than you think. And I'll see you in the next one.